Making decisions. So far, we have learned about ways to build empathy and make requests to find ways to move forward together when we don't meet eye to eye with each other. Finding ways to move forward between two people when we disagree is already challenging. So, what happens when a disagreement involves multiple parties? This can happen in organizations like a school or a company, a group of people living together in a house or a dorm, or a big project team, in which multiple people have different opinions on a particular issue. If you have been part of a disagreement like this before, unless it's facilitated well, it probably wasn't much fun, was it? Without proper facilitation, a dialogue sharing different perspectives can continue on and on. And when it comes to making decisions on ways to move forward, people are often so stuck in their positions that it's hard to come to an agreement. Even if decisions are made, people often have issues with the ways in which decisions are made because different decision making strategies have not been explored and have not been agreed upon beforehand. So, in this lesson, we will explore ways in which decisions can be made across multiple parties and how we might apply a decision making strategy that's based on understanding everyone's needs. So, when two or more individuals disagree on an issue, there are different ways in which one can respond to such disagreement, which lies somewhere on the spectrum from passive to aggressive. The ways in which individuals respond from passive to aggressive, especially if these individuals hold power within the community, can affect the ways in which decisions are made as to how to move forward. So, let's examine together what the different ways look like. On the passive end lies avoidance. This is when conflict arises, one doesn't admit that there is a problem or pretends that there is no problem. You would see this when someone avoids a situation or runs away from a situation to have to face those who they are in conflict with. They may pretend that everything is okay, suppressing any emotions or thoughts that may be bubbling up as a result of the conflict. It's a way to not take responsibility for finding ways to move forward on an issue. Another passive response to conflict is to let the other have his or her own way, which is to abide by what the others wish for and let go of their own wishes. Unlike avoidance, this is a case of someone actually facing the conflict, but apologizing to the other party or agreeing to the other party to end the conflict, even though this behavior may be contrary to what they truly feel or think inside. They keep their feelings and thoughts to themselves so that they don't exacerbate the conflict. Now, on the other extreme end of how one might react to a conflict is to fight for their own way, which is to do whatever it takes to achieve their own mission at whatever cost. You might see them using forms of intimidation like raising voice or violence to get their way, cutting off what the other is saying, and ignoring what the others wish for, and their thoughts and their feelings. These behaviors will most likely force a way that only represents the ideas of those exhibiting the aggressive behavior. Others might abide by it, but it will come from a place of fear or hopelessness. Now, in between passive and aggressive ways of reacting to conflict is a spectrum of assertive ways to respond to conflict. This is when an individual is able to share their feelings and thoughts. They also listen to the needs of others and make an attempt to consider the needs of different individuals as equally as possible to come to a decision as to how to move forward. Now, based on the different ways in which individuals, especially those in power, may react to a conflict, there are different ways in which decisions can be made within a group. Firstly, on the passive end is having no structure for decision-making process. This is a strategy that is founded on rugged individualism and trusts individuals to make decisions. It occurs when there is no one who holds responsibility to facilitate a decision-making process on behalf of the group. While the idea of autonomy and freedom that this method is founded on sounds nice, this decision making strategy is not cohesive and is often chaotic, especially if values and goals are not shared within the group involved. Then, on an aggressive end, is an authoritarian approach of making decisions, when a leader or leaders who usually hold positions of power direct the decision to the rest of the group. This approach works well when fast decisions need to be made and there is a clear accountability and responsibility for the decisions made. However, with this approach, usually many needs and views are not heard, and other members in the group may not understand or agree with the decisions made. This in turn leads to demotivation of other members in the group to carry out the decision. Then there is a spectrum of assertive ways in which decisions can be made. One of these methods is voting, which is to find ways to move forward by allowing the majority to get their way. This method is often used when there is a limited time to make decisions, and usually for matters in which there are clear options. Voting is, however, divisive and is rather on the aggressive end of responding to conflict, as the needs of the minority do not get represented in the result. Another method to respond to conflict is to exercise a compromise, which is to find ways in which each member involved gains a little and loses a little. This is a style that makes an effort to discuss and understand the root of the issue and makes an effort to come up with solutions that meet multiple needs. However, because solutions in which all needs are fully met cannot be achieved, decisions are made in which everyone gives up a little of their needs to achieve an agreement. So, while an agreement can be achieved, it doesn't yield a 100% satisfaction rate for all parties. And then finally, there is a consensus building method to respond to conflict. This is to find a win-win solution for all parties involved. This takes the form of everyone having a chance to share their observations, feelings, and needs, and being listened to intently by others. Through this deep dialogue, it's possible to find out what the root of the issue is, and from finding out everyone's needs, solutions are developed together that meet all of the needs. This method can gain a total buy-in from all parties because everyone is listened to equally. It's really an ideal form of creating agreements for how to move forward, but this is extremely difficult to do. In fact, in order for consensus to be built, various conditions need to be in place. Firstly, there needs to be a common goal in terms of a mission that the group has or the direction that they're heading towards as a team or a project or a community. And there needs to be a commitment to reach consensus. If anyone is looking to get their own way aggressively or looking to passively respond, this will not work. So there has to be an active participation. Everyone needs to participate and not sit back and be passive. And there needs to be trust and openness because everyone needs to be willing to share their needs from deep within. And there needs to be a sufficient time because it really takes time to really hear everyone out and come to solutions that meet multiple needs. And there needs to be a clear process for how to proceed the conversation so everyone's ideas are heard equally and that the conversation is not dominated by those who speak the loudest. So in order for this to happen, there needs to be good facilitation. And for this, there needs to be a good facilitator, often a third party that's not invested personally to a particular outcome. So in order for all of these conditions to be met, a lot of prior work is necessary to build a community. While consensus building is challenging to do, especially when it involves multiple parties, it's a decision-making strategy that gets to the heart of the communication method that we have been learning thus far, that builds understandings and cultivates connections. It's therefore worth practicing. So in my class, I run a simulation called a missing brownie, and the plot is that one housemate claims that their brownie is missing from the fridge once again. There has been over 3 house meetings already regarding stealing in the house, each time ending up with no clear solution as to how to proceed forward. Now, different members in the class are given roles with different opinions and judgments regarding the issue. They exercise breaking down their judgments into observations, feelings, and needs, and practice expressing these ideas and making requests accordingly. At the same time, they practice listening intently to others with a goal to develop solutions that meet as many needs as possible. Since consensus building is difficult to do without facilitation, I also ask one or two members of the class to act as facilitators to the dialogue. Now, this is an excellent exercise full of great learning opportunities, so if you wish to conduct it, please check out the activity page of this lesson. Now, I've shared how challenging consensus building can be, so can you imagine the chance of managing negotiations across 195 countries to come to a legally binding agreement? It would be difficult, but it is definitely not impossible, and we have a real-life example to prove it. So, in the United Nations Climate Change Summit in Paris in 2015, a consensus across 195 countries was made possible in regards to mitigating global warming. In the summit, instead of repeating stated positions, each party was encouraged to speak personally and state their red lines, which are thresholds that they don't want to cross. But while telling others their hard limits, they were also asked to provide solutions to find a common ground. The decision that came from the summit to mitigate global warming is such that really has the potential to move our humanity forward. How exhilarating would it be to achieve such a breakthrough? If 195 countries can do it, we can do it too. Now, in this section, I'll be sharing some extra information for those who are interested in the difference between litigation method and the nonviolent communication method of working with a conflict. I'm sharing this comparison as students in our school practice both methods to work with a conflict, and it's important to understand which method is suitable for what situation so that we can use them purposefully. If you're not interested in this section, then feel free to skip over this section. If you are interested, though, before I share the differences, please take a shot at filling out this table. So let's begin by learning about what litigation is about. Litigation is a process with the purpose of ending a conflict by bringing a clear outcome in which one party is right and the other wrong, or one is good and the other bad. The prosecutor and the defender's roles in the trial processes are to focus on strategies, which is what the individuals did around the issue at hand. They come to a trial with the intention to judge and blame the opponents and reinforce certain stories to make their case. In this process, it doesn't really matter if they reveal the true observations, feelings, and needs of various individuals involved, because the role of the lawyers is to direct parties towards a settlement, often without coming to grips with underlying issues driving the conflict at hand. The decision that is made at the end is power-based, and it is either directed by a judge or juries that vote. While the purpose of the litigation method is to end conflict, the purpose of a dialogue that applies nonviolent communication is to learn from conflict so that individuals can understand more about themselves and others and build their capacity to problem solve accordingly. Therefore, the focus is less to do with what the various parties did, but more to do with understanding why the various parties did what they did. By finding out the needs, the underlying reasons for their actions, it can open up multiple options to choose from for how to proceed moving forward. Therefore, the intention by which various individuals involved join the dialogue is to understand each other. So whatever stories or judgments they have about each other is broken down to observations, feelings, and needs. A mediator or a facilitator is usually very important to guide a conversation like this, and their role is to be an empathetic and honest agent that empowers the parties to solve their problems by understanding each other's needs. Therefore, the protagonists of the conflict develop the capacity to come up with solutions as to how to move forward rather than allowing a third party to do this for them. Decisions for how to move forward are needs or interest based rather than power based, so they consider how they might meet all needs in coming up with solutions. This way, growth and learning come with participating in a nonviolent dialogue. So, from this explanation, it might have sounded like I have a preference for nonviolent dialogue, but there are cases in which litigation is absolutely necessary. It is when basic human rights are being jeopardized and there needs to be a fight for justice, or when there is such a disparate power differential in the parties involved that it's too difficult for them to put their needs on the table side by side. However, sometimes as humans want clear outcomes of right and wrong, or we overly seek for efficiency that we resort to the litigation process unnecessarily. It's important to question each case by asking ourselves, can we proceed with a nonviolent dialogue for this issue as a default? And if it is absolutely not possible, to seek for other methods. I personally believe that it is important to use the nonviolent communication method as much as possible, as it is what brings growth to our humanity in terms of how we deal with conflict. So, what kind of a growth am I talking about? It's a growth in each of our minds. With the practice of breaking down judgments into observations, feelings, and needs, and practice of both expressing and hearing others without blame, we are essentially growing to cultivate our self-transforming minds. The four types of minds described here were described in the book Immunity to Change. The self-transforming mind is described as the highest level of development in which one can hold multiple frames and hold contradictions simultaneously in their mind. They can stand back from their own filter and look at the filter to recognize their own bias and not just through it. There are only a very few percentage of people in this world who can do this, but imagine what the world would be like if more could. Wouldn't our world be more kind and compassionate? So, in summary, there are different ways in which one can respond to conflict on a spectrum from passive to aggressive ways. And depending on how the individuals who make up the group, especially those in power positions, react to conflict, it can influence how decisions are made as to how to move forward. There are advantages and disadvantages to different decision-making methods, but consensus building method is the one that most allows for understandings to be developed across multiple parties and connections to be cultivated. I'm sharing this lesson on decision-making processes because I hope that in the future, we can more than not choose methods purposefully that value each and every human being rather than simply resorting to what seems easy, efficient, and power-based. This week's practice will focus on paying attention to how decisions are made in your community and why. This can give more information as to how to improve connections within your community. So best wishes to you all.